Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for so many of you still being here this afternoon. In case any of you haven't figured out who I am by now, I'm Suzanne McGurn, President and CEO of CADTH. Je suis Suzanne McGurn, le PDG de la CADTH. Welcome to the closing plenary session of 2023 CADTH Symposium. I think it's important to start off with recognizing that we have had 3 thought-provoking and engaging days full of dialogue, discussion, debate, and probably most importantly, friendship and fun. We want to wrap up the symposium in the same way. This week, we've explored new development, approaches, and initiatives that are shaping future-ready health systems. In this session, we're going to explore future-proofing, the process of anticipating the future and introducing changes to minimize disruption, because we've had a lot of experience at that lately. This is no easy task, however, especially in a field, as we've learned over the last few days, as complex and demanding as healthcare. For this session, we've reached out to policymakers, industry, patients, and universities and asked them about their best ideas for building resiliency into health systems to ensure uninterrupted care, even in the face of unseen challenges. Our panel will share with you their ideas today. Each expert will have up to 5 minutes to present their big idea for future-proofing health systems, and then we will take your questions. So each of them will present first, and then we will open it up to questions. Now, let's meet our distinguished panel. Mitch Mineo is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Pharmaceutical Service Division with the British Columbia Ministry of Health. He also chairs the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance, commonly referred to as the PCPA Governing Council. Brigitte Nouat is the President and CEO of Roche Canada Pharma. Dr. Mohamed Mamdani is Vice President of Data Science and Advanced Analytics at Unity Health Toronto and Director of University of Toronto Temerty Faculty of Medicine Center for Artificial Intelligence Research and Education in Medicine. Eric Bélair is Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy Branch at Health Canada. Rounding out the panel is Marnie Paradis, the Chair of CADTH's Patient and Community Advisory Committee. She is also the founder of the Yukon T1D Support Network, a nonprofit dedicated to changing territorial health policies to better reflect the needs of Yukon residents living with type 1 diabetes. So Mitch, we're going to start with you. Over to you. Let's hear your idea.
Thank you, Suzanne. I have the pleasure of presenting my big idea first. I think maybe the way that we're sitting, it's big, bigger, biggest, huge, gigantic. So just remember that when you're voting. My idea is around a new reimbursement system for paying for drug products. And I have to say from the outset that this isn't my idea. It's an idea that Dr. Aidan Hollis from the University of Calgary, professor of economics, presented this idea to the Office of Health Economics, and they had a competition, and he won the prize there. So I'm not responsible for this idea. It was brought to my attention, and I thought it was worthy of discussion or presenting here today. What we've done, and I have to give some credit to my team at the PCPA, particularly Daniel Sperber, who is the senior economist there, who took Dr. Hollis's idea and kind of expanded upon it. So I've attempted to adapt Dr. Hollis's ideas to the Canadian pharmaceutical environment. And I should say, I mean, I'm presenting this idea because as Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for pharmaceutical services in British Columbia and as the chair of the PCPA, this kind of appeals to me because it deals with both access and price, which are pretty high-level strategic objectives for us. And I do want to say that I'll take personal responsibility for any changes or misinterpretations of Dr. Hollis's work, and it was my team that maybe bastardized some of his thoughts a little bit for this discussion. So as you all know, drug prices consider many different elements of value, and there's things like the extending the length of life, the quality of life, equity, innovation, etc. And the prices have been rising significantly over the past decade. And I know we spent a lot of time at the symposium talking about drug prices and those drugs where there's uncertain evidence, but this isn't necessarily about that. It's about just pricing and pricing drugs to some extent that where there is evidence, but there's still high prices. But what we're seeing is high prices delay and even can prevent patient access for drugs, as well as threaten sustainability of healthcare budgets. And I work on the governing council of the PCPA, 14 different decision makers on that, different prevalence of disease and different budgets. So when we're looking at drug prices, a lot of times when we're having our deliberations, one province can say, you know, I'm perfectly happy with that price and we should go forward. Other jurisdictions say, look, we've got a big population, or we've got a more liberal or generous drug plan. So we would like to see these prices reduced somewhat. So those are the type of discussions that I think happen, and then we get into negotiations with the manufacturer, and there can be delays, and you all know that there could be delays for months, even years, as we negotiate the price. At present, the patients, public, and the private drug plans are solely responsible for paying for the drugs, and the manufacturers are reimbursed on a per unit basis. And manufacturers are always interested in time to listing. They want to get their revenue back. They want to, get their revenue back and their investment back in innovation. So time is of the essence, and we're all under pressure to make that happen. And patients are waiting for the drugs as well. So this concept is about separating the price of the drug and from the reimbursement for the price of the drug and the reimbursing for the innovation itself. So what it's all about is taking the marginal cost of producing and distributing the drug and having a separate price for that and a discussion around that. And then on the other hand, having a reward or a fund that's available for compensating and investing in the innovation. So the part one of this is the cost of production. Canadian list prices for new medicines would be set to approximate the average cost of producing and distributing the drug. And in a de-linked price model, this price is public and applies to all patients. And it would be kind of similar to what we're paying right now for generic drugs. And then the second part of this, and although Dr. Hollis's paper didn't speak about outcome-based or managed entry agreement, he was talking more just about compensating the innovators for their investment in research. We've kind of taken this and said, you know, we could have a fund, a federal fund that's actually looking at the incremental benefit, health benefit that the new innovation provides to the system, and then have a very transparent and well understood kind of formula for arriving at what the cost of that or the value, I guess, of that innovation is. And that money could be provided to the company over a period of time, say maybe 10 years or something, to make it equivalent to what a patent period would be as well. So in this way, and I'm running out of time, in this way we could quickly provide access to the drugs for patients at a marginal cost, and then after that's done, we could be working with the companies using this formula to compensate them for the innovation that they've developed. And we could do it on a national basis so that just because one province or territory has a smaller or larger population of patients who would use that product, the innovation could be kind of equalized across all the jurisdictions in the federal government. So I'll stop there, and thank you.
Merci and thank you, Mitch. Brigitte, please welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation et c'est un vrai plaisir d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour cette session. So what I want to do is ask you to imagine a scenario with me. Imagine a Canadian patient who visits her general practitioner. She understands that she has a chronic disease, and she is then referred to do some laboratory work and get her blood work done. Imagine that from that blood work, she is then referred to her specialist to manage her chronic condition. And next, she goes to her pharmacy, where she is fulfilling her medications and her scripts. And in each of these critical steps, imagine the same patient records and data are available to every healthcare practitioner along her journey. And the patient can access her own data as well. And not only that, she is the owner of her personal health data, and it contains her complete health profile. This is patient care without paper. There's no more losing your requisitions at the bottom of your purse. There's no more forgetting where you put it. There's no more forgetting what your physician told you and trying to remember it for your next appointment. And there's an increased sense of compliance when you're going to your pharmacy and understanding what medications are automatically being dispensed to you. And so for us, this is data-driven healthcare with patients at the center. And that is the title of my idea, #AxeTheFacts. This is healthcare with timely, digital, trackable outcomes, digital platforms that are housing medical records, diagnostics, labs, and prescriptions. And best of all, you're not waiting 2 years for access to new medicines, because as we've had sessions earlier today and earlier in the days you've had, we've also understood that these platforms can help us with registries establishing different ways that we might collect information and real-world evidence and be able to think of some of the new innovative pricing models that have been discussed. What I have just described, though, it isn't that far off of a future vision we can and should be having for healthcare across our country. In fact, this is healthcare that's happening right now in other countries like Finland, like Denmark, like Belgium. And so it's not a pie-in-the-sky idea. It's in fact my experience as a patient living in Belgium. That was the scenario that I was describing to you. And so what I want to leave you with is that Canada, too, we can also be an international leader with best-in-class healthcare systems that have ambitious approaches to data-driven healthcare. We have all of the ingredients necessary, and we have so much potential that we can achieve this if we want to. And now is the time to have that ambition. We already know that we have the scientific excellence of our research institutions. You're about to hear from some. And that Canada is home to top universities, top colleges. We're also home to top talented in the life sciences sector, and we're already leading in artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are enablers to these health data systems. So we could lead in health data healthcare as well. Through data-driven healthcare, we can create health systems that learn from evidence and insights to become more adaptable, resilient, and sustainable for better outcomes for patients and for increased economic growth for our country. Because we all know that a data-enabled system will actively use information, data, evidence to better serve patients, their care, their families' care, and ultimately support the learning system healthcare that we're looking for. So my proposal to all of you is that it's time to put patients at the center of care and to up our game on data-driven healthcare. We already have a national data strategy in place, which means we have the framework, and we now have to be leaning in all together, all of our different industries, all of our different parts of the different sectors. We all have to be working together to implement from coast to coast to coast. And it needs to happen with urgency. There are other jurisdictions like the EU, the European Health Data Space, already implementing and already at a point where they're evolving to the next level. And not only because there's competition should we be doing this, but it's because this is what is needed in order to really enable a future of paperless care where patients are supported seamlessly in every step of their healthcare journey and have faster access to medicines and Health Canada approved medicines. Data-driven healthcare is right there in front of us. You can feel it, you can almost reach it, and we are almost there. And I think it's attainable, it's within our reach, and it is about partnership, it's about collaboration, it's about our ambition, and it's about wanting, all of us recognizing we all want the same thing, which is ensuring that the best possible patient outcomes are achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. Merci. To everyone, please remember, jot your questions down so by the time you get to the end, you don't have forgotten the ones from the earlier ideas. Next up, big idea number 3 comes from Dr. Mohammed Mamdani.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to build on Brigitte's excellent idea. You've heard the stories, right? Our healthcare system is in shambles. Our healthcare professionals are stressed out. We're incredibly inefficient, and our patients don't have the outcomes they deserve. How many people can relate to these sorts of stories? No? All right, thank you. So my idea actually, again, builds on Brigitte's, and I'm going to kind of go back to basics around how do clinicians make decisions? How many people here have a clinical background? So you might be able to relate to me. I'm going to argue that a lot of what we do in healthcare is data-driven, right? From diagnosis to prognosis to treatment, right? And then, of course, we have to communicate. But these 3 things, diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment, simple things like, for example, studies, one of which was done in Ottawa, has shown that about 1/3 of patients diagnosed and managed for asthma actually don't have asthma. We could do better, right? Study after study after study has shown we are not very good at prognosis. And of course, treatment. I'm going to pick another common example like depression. How do you think we picked the depression treatment that people get placed on? The truth is that a lot of clinicians, they'll say, this one. Let's see in 2 to 4 weeks if it works, and if it doesn't, we'll reassess and we'll try a different one. I think we can do better. So we struggle a lot because the data that we have available, social history, family history, symptoms, physical exam, labs, vitals, medical imaging, medications, the medical literature, a new study is published every 2 minutes. There are over 30 million studies you can access in PubMed. It's impossible to get through all of this. The reality is that a modern complex medical decision involves considering hundreds, if not thousands, of different parameters. And yet Miller from the 1950s, a famous psychologist, has brilliantly concluded that the average human can process 7 plus or minus 2 things at the same time. It's not a fair fight, is it? What does that result in? A lot of inefficiency. There's studies from CAITH and such, but some of the best numbers out there suggest that 25 to 40%, it's a staggering number, of patients receive ineffective or potentially harmful treatments. I propose one of the answers to this is AI, and I'm not going to talk about some theoretical stuff. I'm going to use the example of the hospital that I come from, Unity Health Toronto, in Toronto. We actually have a dedicated artificial intelligence program. It's a strategic priority of our hospital. I'm going to show you things that have actually transpired by using AI to move the needle on healthcare. This is it's based on an actual patient. I can't release the results because of privacy considerations. But it's a patient who came into our hospital with inflamed gallbladder or cholecystitis. Pretty standard, something we see all the time. Had a GI workup done. Physician was called that evening because the patient displayed shortness of breath. Physician ordered chest x-ray and labs. Vital signs were checked twice overnight, midnight and 6 a.m. Physician was called the next morning at 8:30 a.m. because there was a sudden drop in blood pressure. Unfortunately, the patient deteriorated and died that day. And of course, our internist said, 1 out of 12 internal medicine patients will die. So what can we do about it? Well, we could have done a lot of things. We could have increased monitoring. We could have looked for signs of sepsis, initiated antibiotics. We could have called the critical care response team to have them on alert. We could have called palliative care if we knew there was nothing we could do about the patient, and at least they could die a comfortable, dignified death. We could have communicated. We could have done all of this much earlier, but we didn't because we didn't know that patient was going to die. The reality is about 40% of these patients, they're going to die no matter what you do. But 50 to 60% of these patients, we could have had a shot if we had predicted earlier. And so the challenge was, can we predict who's going to die so we can intervene earlier? And that's exactly what we did. So if you come to our hospital, on our internal medicine unit, you will be monitored by artificial intelligence. What the algorithm does is it runs every hour on the hour, and it monitors patients. It's been trained on over 20,000 patients worth of data. And it categorizes patients as low, medium, and high risk. As soon as it reaches a high-risk threshold, it pages the medical team, and the medical team then needs to come see the patient within 2 hours of being paged. And they're given some suggestions: increase monitoring, look for signs of sepsis, and so forth. So we've deployed this in October of 2020. And what have we found? Well, if you look at this graph, this actually shows you our mortality rates among our high-risk patients. And the solid blue line is the mortality rates among the most recent time frame, and the light lines are in the past 4 years. Onset of COVID, we saw significant increases in mortality, 35%, 70%, and so forth, increased mortality rates. That's when we deployed the solution. And despite seeing many more COVID patients, we saw reductions in mortality. We're seeing about a 26% reduction in mortality among our high-risk patients. In terms of efficiency, we've developed and deployed algorithms just to figure out, how do we staff our nurses better? How do we right-size staffing? We created an algorithm in 3 weeks, deployed it at 2 hospitals with an estimated annual cost reduction of $1 million a year. We can improve efficiency with these AI solutions. How about making it easier for our doctors who are incredibly stressed out? We have a tool in our multiple sclerosis clinic. It was just, a thing was written about it just today, where what this thing does is it uses natural language processing. If a patient comes in and a physician says, I have to see this patient at 4:10 p.m., I just finished my last patient at 4 p.m., how can I go through 7 years of history? In less than 2 seconds, the algorithm will actually read through 7 years of history and summarize the patient profile for you. It'll tell you they had a relapse here, here, and here, new T2 lesions on their MRI in the brain here and here. If you're interested, you can click and it'll pull up the entire visit record. It will do all of that again within 2 seconds with over 90% accuracy. What's happening in the broader landscape? Microsoft just signed a deal with Epic. It signed a deal using large language models that will actually be able to answer clinical questions. So you can type in, I've got this patient in the hospital, what do you think the diagnosis is? And it will give you a diagnosis. Can you write my admission note for me? Can you write my discharge note for me? Yes, they'll be able to do that as well. Patients will be able to access this as well. How accurate is it? Well, the latest iteration by Microsoft has shown that it scored 93% on the United States medical licensing exam, better than the vast majority of physicians have done. This, I believe, will actually change the game of how we actually deliver healthcare. And this is how I believe that we'll be able to provide better care for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohaben. Merci. We've had 3 great ideas, 2 more to come. Over to you, Eric. Welcome. Oops, I did something wrong.
Bon après-midi tout le monde et merci beaucoup aux organisateurs pour m'avoir invité pour ce dernier panel. So my big idea, I would say, like, it's really been informed by like lots of discussions I've had with many of you in the room and a number of stakeholders kind of like over the years. So really what I'd like to kind of put forward is a bit of the concept of better evidence marketplace for decision makers. And I'll start maybe with a bit of the premise for this. So as we all know, with the way our federation is structured, like there's really a complex landscape from a decision-making perspective. So we're all aware about the many players that take decisions like on a daily basis to be able to support the needs of patients. So whether it's drug plan managers or organizations like CADTH and INES, or whether it's people on the front lines, like in the healthcare system, making decisions about the most effective treatment. And on the other end, you have kind of all the evidence that is out there, and we live in a world now where there's really opportunities to be able to improve the data in real time available for decision makers to take decisions. So often, however, like the beauty of our federation is that there can be like fragmentation in terms of decision making and maybe some missed opportunities along the way as decision makers make like their own decisions along the chain. So really like the idea that like proposing from an evidence marketplace perspective, it's really to like I believe now that we have the technology at our disposal, and if we were able to really understand like what is like the decision, like what is the evidence that the decision makers need, what is their context for taking these decisions, and what are the common aspects that all decision makers need to be able to inform their parts of the puzzle, but also what's unique about like the specific decisions they need to take. And then how can we work kind of across the system to make sure that all the people that enable the development of evidence, whether it's the drug companies or researchers or people that kind of interact with kind of the data produced by clinical trials and the healthcare system, how can we make sure that like respecting the respective role of like the decision makers, how do we make sure that we don't have missed opportunities because there's imperfect like information or misunderstanding about what the decision makers need, and maybe misalignment in terms of what is being requested from the people that need to produce the evidence in support of the decision making. So really, I think we have all the ingredients based on the two like presentations just before me, with the data platforms and like the advancement of AI, and really the networks that we have at our disposal across the country, like from like clinical trials perspective, and really like the opportunity to put all of this together and be able to ensure that even if we don't agree all the time with the decisions that come out of like the various program managers in the country, that at least we know that they all add the right information at the right time, and to be able to take a decision that was informed by the best evidence and the best knowledge. And really, at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that there's no missed opportunities because of the evidence marketplace may not have been as efficient as it could be, and really to make sure that at the end of the day we use the limited dollars to in the most effective way in support of better patient outcomes. So that's the idea. Thank you.
Merci, Eric. And I always appreciate someone who's willing to tackle the fragmentation of the interest of our federation. Last idea, we always, when possible, like to give the last word to our patient and caregiver representative. Marnie, over to you. I think I'm going to do this. Whoops.
Thank you. I hope you all had a fruitful and engaging few days, but I have to ask, who's tired? Can you please raise your hands? Yeah, I feel your pain. So my suggestion here is that patient co-designing clinical study is critical, but it's going to take a few steps to get to that point. So to start, I'm just going to lay the groundwork to my thinking. A few months back, I listened to a podcast where the host had paraphrased poet Rainer Rilke. And I just realized I'm about to paraphrase a paraphrase. Okay, it went something along the lines of, if to rush to answer denies the dignity of the question, you should have to live the question. So it sat with me and it continues to resonate with me, and I'm applying it here. What does it mean to live the question of building resilience into healthcare to meet unforeseen challenges? So I'm going to start with the patient narrative, as it can opportune persons to see the world through the lens of another, to actually touch the experiences of another. This isn't anecdotal. Narratives are descriptive opportunities to critically examine how systems create huge and small cracks that people continuously fall through or are pushed into. With permission from one of my children, I'm going to share our story, our descriptive narration, in hopes that it highlights the end-user realities of decisions that are made today. I was born and raised in the Yukon Territory. I grew up poor, and for quite some time I was very poor. We all were. We experienced episodic homelessness and periods of living in cabins with no running water or electricity. And being what it was, poverty imprints itself onto the body, and it's a hardship that lasted many years. I had 2 children before I graduated high school, and when we were not living paycheck to paycheck, one of my children, who, when he turned 17, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. His glucose was poorly controlled, so after a few years, his endocrinologist transitioned him to another insulin. This insulin wasn't covered under insured health, and we had no additional insurer. The glucometer to measure his glucose wasn't effective in meeting his needs, so to help prevent the frequent seizures that were occurring, we transitioned to a continuous glucose monitor. This monitor wasn't covered under insured health. Then he transitioned out of pediatric care into the non-existent adult care. So we lost his endo and we had to seek a new endo. Since we live in the north, we had to fly him out to visit this new specialist. So try as we might to distance ourselves from the debilitating effects of poverty, it was close to impossible. Though we were still in the low earning bracket, we were required to pay out of pocket for the privilege of keeping this young man alive, paying for insulin, paying for glucose measurement, paying for healthcare. And my story doesn't exist in some distant past where we have all learned from our mistakes. This is very recent. This is the kind of story where we still have all of our receipts. It's a story of the poor paying in full for essential medication. So what does it mean to live the question of building resilience into healthcare to meet unforeseen challenges? What does it mean to persons who are living stories exactly like mine? Why would I, a then poor single mom, struggling to obtain life-sustaining medication for her child, dignify a question that centers the future? If countless persons throughout this country are denied access for any number of reasons, who are we, the great thinkers in HTA, to ask how we can prepare for a future when a future is being denied those same persons? And here's the thing about preparing for future challenges. It's good, it's noble, and it's critical work, but it cannot be contemplated in absence of the present. If the conditions that propagate the harms against patients are the same conditions in which resilience and future prepping is sought, future challenges will always be a surprise because the lens hasn't changed. It isn't enough to have a singular or a duplicate set of solutions. Rather, the conditions that somehow deny a poor young person his essential medication and life-saving devices need to be challenged. And those conditions, though they may be happening in the future, are certainly happening right now. Now, the people in this room are not responsible for the systems that create these conditions, and in fact, I have consistently heard from members present that they want conditions to change. However, the majority of us, and I count myself in among this, are complicit in the perpetuation of harms regularly facing patients. We contribute to and benefit from healthcare processes, even though those same processes are denying persons dignity and are recreating and compounding oppressive actions that strip vulnerable persons of their ability to access medicine. So the solutions to future problems aren't dreamt of in a vacuum. They are the actions that are needed now, and they need to reflect the present. We need to engage in preparatory work for the demands that came at us yesterday. And what's an example of that? So if CADTH is reviewing evidence and the evidence says one thing, but the near univocal patient experience says another thing, there's something missing. If causality is relegated to the halls of RCT, then patients need to be able to fully participate in what is being studied and why, in how the study unfolds, where it unfolds, and with whom it unfolds. And if manufacturers aren't able to ensure adequate co-design, then regulatory bodies need to reflect on how policies and legislation are upholding oppressive practices, practices that have significant downstream effects. Because right now, stories like mine are not unique, but they must be rendered historical. So what does it mean to live the question of building resilience into healthcare to meet unforeseen challenges? It means repairing the harms of today. It means bringing the focus upstream to the space where evidence is manufactured. Thank you.
Marnie, in addition to thank you for contributing an idea, thank you for sharing your lived life experience. So, there you have it. 5 big ideas to future-proof health systems. Let me press my little button. Now it's up to all of you to ask questions or comment on these big ideas. And first off, I think it's really important to recognize there's no right answer to this question. These are great ideas and they're complex problems. But I started this session off 3 days ago talking about the fact that there's brilliancy in this room that will allow us to create a brilliant health system. So I continue to urge you to contribute to this dialogue. So, as you think about the questions, make sure there's staff going around. Peter, do you have a microphone as well? If anyone wants to ask a question in the room, it's bright up here, so please wave your arm vigorously. And while I'm waiting for some questions from the floor, perhaps that maybe we should start off with, why haven't we done? And so maybe for each of the panel members, in preparing for today or on reflection of the discussion you've just heard, if your idea is truly a big idea, any reflections on why it hasn't worked yet? I'm just randomly going to pick people. So, Mohammed.
Sure.
You can just talk.
Yeah, okay, you can hear me okay? Fantastic. I think for my idea with respect to AI, I think it's a bit challenging because we've seen it disrupt other sectors. And you'll see like who uses smartphones. I hope everybody here uses smartphones. Do people use Siri and Google Assistant and that sort of thing? Do you use Google Maps? And that's all AI based, right? And it's fundamentally changed the game on things. Uber, Lyft, they're all using AI technologies, but healthcare has not. And I think the reason why is not because of technology. The technology's there, really. It's about culture. And I think we have a hard time letting go of fax machines, of thinking beyond the chief and tribe mentality, of being more collaborative. I think it's that culture that needs a bit of a shift.
Thanks, Mohammed. Marnie.
Can you repeat the question?
If your idea is truly big, why haven't we done it yet?
So A, it's not my idea, and B, I think it's more of a call just to do the right thing. I don't understand the mechanisms that are put in place to ensure a patient co-design. I'm not fully immersed in that world. I just know what has affected me and what has affected my family and what has affected other patients is often a result of the lack of evidence that's done as a result of clinical trials that have very defined parameters that aren't thought of by patients and don't have patient contribution to the design of it. So ideally, in an ideal world and one in which we should be working towards, patients would have tremendous control into how those clinical trials are executed.
Thanks. Mitch, any thoughts?
Well, I think for my big idea is, we haven't really evolved with the changes that are occurring in the pricing structures around products. It once was true that individuals could afford to pay for their drugs and they had insurance to support them when they needed it. Now we're getting to the place where drugs on an individual basis are unaffordable and insurance has to backstop all the therapies or many of the therapies that are around. We're not looking at small molecules anymore. So I think we're kind of captured in this price per unit situation that we've done traditionally and historically over a number of years, and we haven't really thought about other ways in which to to provide fair pricing both for individuals and also to ensure that manufacturers and people who are investing in innovation are getting fairly compensated for further innovation. And I think they deserve that type of reward. And I think with this system too, you could have modifiers in the structure where you could actually try to bring forward investment in therapeutic areas where there's unmet need.
Thanks, Mitch. Brigitte.
I mean, it's a great question. I would build off of Mohammed's point. I think COVID, our lockdown phases with COVID have taught us why health data was important. I don't think we appreciated it in the same way ahead of, and it became the norm for us to want to know what was happening with the numbers, where were the outbreaks, how were things evolving. And so I think probably why it hasn't happened has a lot to do with we didn't understand how it could be beneficial to our lives. And I do think we also didn't have the ambition for it. And I think other countries have appreciated and learned how to bring these technologies to the forefront. And I think Canada has also now, all of us as Canadians, in fact, also understand it now at the personal level.
And last but not least, Eric.
So with respect to having an effective system-wide decision-making process, so kind of I mentioned the complexity of it, given how the programming is structured in the healthcare system. However, I believe there's ways to be able to address kind of that complexity, and we there's a number of examples we've seen in past years where you've had decision makers work together to be able to align their processes. So whether for example from a regulatory perspective, the work that's been done on aligned reviews with CADTH, and being able to work with people that bring submissions forward about the kind of evidence that's required by different decision makers. And often there's a lot of commonalities in terms of what is required, and often there's particularities that can be clarified early on to make sure that that evidence is generated in the right way at the right time for the people that take decisions. So I think there's a lot that's being done to be able to facilitate that collaboration with decision makers. One thing that's important is just kind of recognizing kind of the constraints that individual decision makers have, what is kind of the piece of the puzzle they need to tackle, and everybody's trying to contribute at the end of the day to kind of the patient, but just being able to recognize that particularity, but make this kind of easy to understand to people so that they can be engaged in that decision-making process. And I hear too often, for people that patients that understand really well that system, and they feel themselves that it's super kind of complex to understand. And then if we think about people outside of that kind of that system, really trying to make sense of it is really difficult. And then I think the hope I see is really from a technology perspective, and the data platforms that we've talked about. There's a lot of potential to use this to be able to kind of just make this a more effective way to partner between the decision makers, the people that bring evidence forward, and enabling participation of patients in all of this.
Merci. I'm going to maybe just sort of some of what I heard. Change is hard, and I think the other things that I heard is we don't communicate well, which includes not listening. And I think a part of it is also capacity. And in a country that is federated like Canada, some of what is already difficult in a single-payer country is hard. It becomes very difficult here, recognizing the complexity. Before I go to some of the questions I have on my podium, Peter, do you have a question from online that you'd like to pose?
Sure, thank you. This question is actually, I believe, for Brigitte. It is, how would issues around privacy be handled if we're distributing patient data to all healthcare practitioners?
Yeah, it's a great question. It is contemplated, I mean, Mohammed could speak to it as well. It is contemplated in the Pan-Canadian Health Data Strategy, and it's contemplated in the Pan-Canadian AI Strategy. What I saw in Europe, which I think is a place where we could be inspired, is that there is important privacy legislation that is part of this. What I'm speaking to is not personalized data but aggregated information that comes together and helps us then be able to plan out the right decisions at macro levels, and then that personal information is available between the person and the healthcare physicians through the platform. But these platforms are very much protected in Europe. They're very much protected, the ones that are available in different hospitals, which Mohammed could speak to. But I think it's a fair point to say governance around these and privacy around these health data systems and the interoperability between them and how information is used by the person and then aggregated is a very important factor that I believe the governments are reflecting upon as well, and I believe hospitals are as well. But you could probably speak to it.
Yeah, sure. I can give my thoughts. I've sat on a few committees and groups, and I think we spend far more time on governance than we do on technical infrastructure. I think we make big mistakes that way, in my humble opinion. Let's get over it, seriously. I think there's a dichotomy here. How many people have Fitbits or health apps, right? How many people actually read all the stuff around privacy, or do you just click, I agree? Yeah, why do we have this debate in healthcare, right? I mean, really, you're giving sensitive information to people you don't even know. And should it be a choice? Absolutely it should. And I think we should figure out how to do it and let people decide if they want in or out. You don't have to be in. For the people who do want to be in, there's all sorts of benefits that can be realized. I imagine that once we actually have something that is functional, doable, and technical, set up, all working, everyone will want to be in because they'll realize the benefits.
Thanks, Mohammed. Do you have another question you want to ask Peter? If not, I have a pile here sorted neatly.
Let's do one more from online, and then we'll go back to yours. But I do have several here. One of the questions is, could each panelist talk about one SMART objective to get closer to implementing their big idea? And the SMART objectives, it's the acronym standing for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely.
And keep it short. I don't know if someone wants to give it a try. Brigitte?
I think, it was hashtag Axe the Facts, right? So I think at the end of the day, what I'm still noticing coming back is that I had to have my referrals faxed to my specialists in order to then be able to see her. And she would not accept anything that was from a international rheumatologist as my referral. And so for me, we could start with coding and billing and stopping fax machines and actually understanding how to use some of these early technologies consistently across our different hospital systems.
The last one is timely. By what date?
By what date? Well, what's possible, Mohammed, in terms of hospital
I'm a
implementation?
nurse,
I mean,
so
I would be crazy. I would say before the end of the year.
Excellent.
It can't be that hard to stop a fax.
Excellent. Mohammed?
Yeah, I think for me it would be, there are more and more of these AI solutions available these days. Either you build it or you buy it, and you can actually buy a few nowadays. So I would say one metric would be that every hospital commits to either purchasing or developing an AI solution, deploying it and evaluating it in terms of patient outcomes or efficiencies or whatever have you, having something tangible within the next 2 years.
Great. Mitch?
That's a very good question. When I reflect on that question, I think about a lot of the stuff that we've discussed throughout the last 3 days with respect to real-world evidence and managed entry agreements and the structures required to implement those. And I think my idea is probably kind of aligned with some of the timelines and other things that would be involved in implementing those type of innovative access agreements.
Any ballpark? I know you're in the PCPA, so I'm going to say ballpark.
Probably after I've retired.
Eric?
For me, like a practical illustration of kind of what I was mentioning in the big idea is really one of the initiatives that my team is leading on drugs for rare diseases, and I think it's a perfect example of how we can try new things to be able at the national level to kind of pool information and data around drugs for rare diseases and be able to support decision-making to arrive at more consistency in terms of patient outcomes. So I'd say this will be kind of something that will be able to be measured against, because that's something we've committed to deliver, and that will certainly really kind of try to move the dial on this idea of effective marketplace for decision makers as part of the work we're going to be doing on that initiative.
And Marnie, I bet I would guess the time for you is now.
There are sophisticated and highly competent patient groups who have already done the groundwork in laying out how to get patient co-design in clinical studies. So I wouldn't waste any time and would just go and speak to these professionals, these experts.
Thank you. Just doing a time check here. Question for you, Mohammed. I mean, there's two questions actually. Is the work, and this goes to how you actually answered the last question. So question one is the work with AI being done at your hospital directly transferable to other hospitals across Canada? Would it require the AI model to be retrained with local data? And how do you ensure, I'm sure this is a question that comes up often, that AI is not discriminating against certain type of patients?
Yeah, those are great questions. So models are, I would say, in theory, should be transferable, but that's not the approach that I would take. No matter how generalizable or transferable your models are, if you're going to be deploying at a different institution or a different environment, you really should be doing your due diligence and retraining. So it is not a plug-and-play type of thing, in my opinion. So if people are contemplating, all right, I'm going to take this algorithm and just pop it into my hospital, I would really refrain from that. It may be that you can do it, but I would do the due diligence, retrain the model, make sure your model performs just as well in your hospital compared to what people are telling you how it would be performing. In terms of looking at things like bias and equity and that sort of stuff, it is a bit challenging because, you know, when I make these presentations, I remember I had a conversation with somebody who came up afterwards and said, you know, have you done due diligence in terms of bias and equity assessment? And we said, yeah, we actually looked at age, so young and old. We looked at sex, males and females. We looked at sick versus not so sick. We looked at a bunch of other stuff, but we didn't look at race because we don't have any race data. We didn't look at socioeconomic status because we don't have any socioeconomic status data. We don't have gender data. We have sex data, but not gender. So am I going to wait until I have all of that data? That could take a decade or two. Or do I actually not do all of this, or do I actually go ahead with it? And some people would feel like it's unethical if you don't do all that due diligence. And I would say, I can pull the algorithm and let people die. Is that ethical? So I think you have to do your best, do the proper due diligence. When data becomes available, you do those assessments. But I don't think it should impede us from actually leveraging these technologies to help patients.
Thank you. The next question I'm going to ask both Eric and Mitch maybe to weigh in on. If we want, and Mohammed, you may, actually all of you may have a comment, but we'll see where we go with this. If we really want a data-driven care for rare diseases, we need to centralize all provincial and jurisdictional data. How can provincial and federal governments collaborate to make this happen? And let's say with a timeline of at least within the next 2 years. Eric?
Yeah, so I'm not sure necessarily that we need to kind of centralize like the data. I think it's really about recognizing, like, we're dealing with small volume, like small populations. I think jurisdictions all recognize kind of the value of collaborating kind of at the national level in terms of being able to kind of look at the data at a bigger scale. And I think it's really about linking kind of existing data, whether it's patient registries or other data that's being collected across jurisdictions. And I think there's just a lot of potential that everybody sees and working together on this. And it's just kind of finding the ways, like how do you do this in a way that you extract the kind of information that's required to be able to inform decision making without having necessarily to kind of centralize it and so I think there is ways of with the technology we have now to be able to just link this better and be able to draw insights from that data. And I think there's a lot of willingness from our partners to be able to work on that. And we have also funding that the federal government's putting forward to be able to help build that national kind of infrastructure, working with CADTH and CAIREM, which will be kind of for the benefit, like the greater public good in terms of advancing that objective.
Mitch, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with what Eric's saying. I don't think we necessarily need to have a centralized data repository or anything, but I think we have to have a common, data dictionary, and I mean, there's a lot of registries that exist today, but the data being collected is not being collected to a great extent in a useful manner, I guess, or form. So I think if we could collaborate on at least having a common kind of standard data platform or whatever with where everything's coded accordingly and everything, it would be helpful, because we are dealing with smaller populations. We're not looking at broad populations, I don't think, at this point. I think we're just looking at registries for certain disease groups.
Yeah.
Can I add? I think what I've learned as well is, the points that the colleagues are making on the panel is, we're talking about data standards and we're talking about interoperability, right? So do we have the same standards? Do we have the same information that's being collected, so that when there is a need to be able to share, we're at least sharing like information? And the same with interoperability. There's no need for centralization, but it needs to be interoperable when the time is necessary. And I could only say, there's a lot to learn from other jurisdictions. And I think that if the European health data space is moving forward, their ambition is 27 countries to be connecting their information together. So if 27 countries have the ambition and can do it, then surely 14 jurisdictions in Canada can have the ambition and can move forward to do it.
And Marnie, I might ask you, the question has been asked, how should they do it? What's your advice to them?
My knowledge on AI extends to the Terminator. I mean, I just don't have that knowledge base. I'm greatly appreciative of learning from all my colleagues. But
listening to you, this conversation requires a patience to participate in the discussions. The question that Mohammed asked about who can do Fitbit sharing, patients need to participate in the dialogue.
Yeah, and right now I don't know that a lot of patients necessarily have the language to be able to participate adequately, so I think that the onus would be on the decision makers to translate what information is needed to the patient so that they can respond in good kind.
Thank you. There's a few questions that are, sorry, go ahead, Mohammed.
I'll just put one comment in from my perspective. I'm going to be a little bit tangential here.
You're allowed.
Because I guess it depends on the purpose that we're talking about. For research, sure, I get it, but
That's true.
I think for clinical care, I don't know. I mean, you need real-time data in most cases, and for that, it takes a fundamentally different model. I am not a fan of federated models for that purpose. I think you can do federation, but I don't think we're there yet. So I'm kind of old school with the centralized model for that purpose. Now, the other thing too is, what is it that we want to get out of these data? So if it is a matter of, I'll give you an example, Connecting Ontario we have, right? And most provinces actually have these real-time data systems in place right now. We've had them for years. So it's not a matter of can we centralize, and we've been doing it for years. It's our research mindset that kind of kicks in around, oh, well, we've got all these disparate data sets. I think we need to look at what other people are doing on the clinical realm and what they want to get out of their systems to be able to learn from them.
Thanks, Mohammed. There's 3 questions related, Mitch, to your idea adopted from somebody else's idea. So I'm going to read them sort of collectively. I'm not sure that you can answer them all. Brigitte, you might actually want to weigh in on a couple of the questions as well. So thank you for sharing the idea to compensate RX&D. Can you talk a little bit more about what the problem is intended to solve, and how does it actually solve it? And how will it help us from a funding the system applied to health technology? This is a question I think, Brigitte, you might want to weigh in. In this big idea, would you include the acquisition cost when a company is bought, or a merger as part of cost of production? And lastly, have we reflected on the risks in this idea? What would stop an industry from simply not bringing products to Canada under this new value proposition? So
They're
Mitch, I'll get you to go. and then
all three good questions, and maybe I'll let you kind of jump in as well. I think the problem that this is intended to solve is just the uncertainty, I think, in the manufacturer recouping their investment. And what we've seen is that, we've got a patent period of time. It takes a long time for that drug to actually go through the clinical trials and then to get market authorization and then go through health technology assessment and finally through negotiation. So there could be, as I mentioned, months and probably years, I mean, through that whole process, definitely years to do it. So there could be an option for, and this wouldn't be applicable to every circumstance, but there could be an option at least where a company could choose to say, you know what, we've got this standardized kind of a pool of money. There's a formula in which we would measure incremental health benefit for you. You'd be guaranteed a reward either annually or a lump sum payment or something, and it would be a fair price for you to recoup your investment. I think it would relieve, you wouldn't necessarily have to have as much marketing and thing because volume would be less significant in this situation. You'd actually be rewarded for the innovation. And as I mentioned before, it could be used as a tool if you have this pool of money, and depending on how it's set up, and this is all very theoretical, but you could have this set up so that it actually incentivizes innovation in certain clinical areas. So you could have a multiplier or something built into that formula where it would actually incent people to bring things to market. It's not applicable in all instances for sure, but it would be an option, just an option rather than relying on the uncertainty that I think comes with negotiating a price and then ensuring that you've got the volume of sales and everything else that you need to actually recoup your money before your exclusivity period expires.
Brigitte, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't appreciate all of the details, of course, and I think that's a very fair comment that you make. The details is what really will be important. I think, what I appreciate from what Mitch has proposed is his comments on pricing having multiple factors involved. The concept that value is really important, and value may mean different things to different stakeholders, and so how does one think that through? And I appreciate your comments as well on the length of commercialization in Canada and the complexity that it has, because all of those things are true. I think that your point about it depends on the situation, I think research and development also takes many forms in Canada in particular, right? It's clinical research, it's academic research, it's research for multinationals, it's startup, it's angel investors, it's venture capital. It's all of those things all together. And so I think that for me, there's much more complexity into research and development. And I think that, that's the ultimate element for me is research also includes lots of failures. It includes the subsequent question I think you had, which was acquisition and partnerships and collaborations and how to take university research and build it and spin it off. And so while I appreciate the concepts, I would say that it's probably a really a bigger question for another time, perhaps.
But if I could just say, and I appreciate everything you've said, and I agree, but all that currently is factored into the per unit price as well. So it would be kind of just delinking the cost of production to all that other stuff that you had mentioned.
So these are big ideas. They're complex. It's very hard in the minutes we've had to talk about it to get a full understanding. So appreciate making voting will be hard, but get ready. It's coming up in a couple of minutes. I'm going to ask one question. And as you answer, I'll just quickly go across the panel. If you could also just make a comment about, are you cheering for your own or are you cheering for someone else's? Is there something that really intrigues you about someone else's idea? So the question that I wanted to pull from is, obviously all these things take us thinking differently and engaging differently. So is the reform that exists or could be copied or created so that we could have multi-stakeholder dialogues. And the example that's given in the question is, for example, to shift away from the system that's been built for a population-based medicine or devices world to one that's a personalized medicine or personalized devices world. Where would those conversations take place? What could you imagine? And as I said, any reflections on your partners on the stage, what intrigues you about their ideas? So maybe with that, Mohammed, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think all the ideas are fantastic. I'm a bit biased because in my journey, I've been through observational epidemiology. I headed up a clinical trial center. I've worked with policy decision makers. Now I'm in this AI space. The reason why I'm in the AI space is because I see such tangible impacts and benefits. And that's really kind of blown me away at how powerful this thing can be to actually make meaningful change and get beyond the constant dialogues that we seem to have. So I would say I'm very supportive of the AI technologies because I've seen the benefits. And the other idea that I think would be fantastic, I think, is the patient co-design. I don't think we have enough of that. And that would fundamentally change, I think, how we actually structure clinical trials. Be very important in my opinion.
Thanks, Mohammed. Eric.
Yeah, I'd say that all the ideas really deal with kind of big systemic issues, and they would all have the potential to kind of have like a large-scale impact. But then they all require a lot of like partnerships and trust, like between the different players in the system. So it will require a lot of willingness to be able to kind of like build that trust and be able to build these relationships, because these are like really tough nuts to crack. And but like there's a lot of hope at the end of the day to really increase kind of like what we can do collectively from a patient perspective.
Thanks, Eric. Marnie.
Yeah, I'm also biased. I certainly expect much more patient involvement across the board. It's nowhere near meeting the level that it needs to be. And that being said, one of the things that really intrigues me is AI, and in particular, how it could be applied remotely. I'm from the north, and I travel frequently across the north, and I know small communities across the north often have they suffer some of therefore loss of the things that we could take for granted in major urban centers. And if we were able to somehow do remote AI to benefit the lives of northern residents, I think it could go a long ways. Thank you.
Mitch.
Yeah, my idea is just really to encourage people to think outside the box. I think that's what I'm getting at. It's definitely less practical, I think, than all four other ideas that are out there. But the reason I put it out there, and after discussions with some of the people on my team, is I thought we talk a lot about managed entry agreements and the structures that we have. We haven't really turned our minds to the high price and what that means, and are we content with just continuing paying on a per unit basis for product and therapies and innovation. So that's why I raise it. I think all the other four. I think Marnie. I mean, I definitely concur with you that patient co-design in clinical studies is needed. Not only needed, it's necessary. I think so. So I agree with that. And all the data ideas are definitely practical. And if I had to pick one, I do like the AI proposal that Mohammed put out. And
rarely do we do this, but last word to industry.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think when you look at all of the ideas that were around the data and the AI piece, one can't survive without the other, in fact. And so we might have inadvertently put a bundled pitch together without knowing so. But listen, I think anything that puts the patient first and anything that really looks at how our healthcare systems can move from the fragile states that they are in now to resilient, sustainable systems that are strong and move into the future, those are the best ideas.
Thank you very much. So panelists, now we're going to let all of the people in the room and online add their voice. So On the screen, hopefully everyone can see, we want you to either open the Slido app or go to slido.com and enter the number 2432987. And so we don't bias, you guys don't get to vote. So again, open the Slido app, go to slido.com and enter the number 2432987. Our colleagues at the back of the room who've been keeping us going are going to open the poll. And we're going to give a few minutes, so there's going to be dead silence. Actually, I can keep rattling on. At an event I was at last week, Brigitte will tell you that I can tap dance, so I could dance while we're waiting. But please take your time, and we're going to watch live the ideas come up. This is one of my favorite things. We actually do this in our town hall for icebreakers in our organization to ask questions and learn a bit more about our organization, usually on fun things. So we'll keep the counting going for a few minutes. I think we're up right now to just about almost 150 votes at this point. We've gone over the 150. We're up to 160. So we're going to hang on a few more minutes. There's a couple here. Continue to invest in the use of AI. It looks like it's, for those of you who don't know me, I like doing some fun things, and I was at the Kentucky Derby, so just this past weekend, so I'm looking like I'm watching the horses come around the bend. So that's my excitement for the moment. So I think our numbers are pausing. We're getting up almost to the 200 mark. So I'm going to give it a few more seconds before I call the winner, because we've got patients we've got Marnie coming, who's coming up? Patients at the Center of Care and upping our game on data-driven healthcare. So we've got Brigitte coming up from behind. But I do have to say, I recognize what Brigitte ended up with, which I think actually her idea with Marnie's are a really nice bundle. And I think the ideas that Eric and Mohammed have are bundled as well about how we work differently together. And as Mitch said, a really out-of-the-box idea. So I think we're going to land here at just shy of 200 votes. So to continue to invest in and use technology and AI in healthcare. So congratulations to my panelists. A big thank you to everyone, and thanks to everyone in the audience for your great comments and questions, not just on this session, but over the past 3 days. So colleagues, you're welcome to leave the stage. I'm going to do my closing remarks, so everyone, they're very short, and we'll be able to move forward and get everybody back traveling and hopefully on their way home to enjoy a long weekend. So thank you, Eric, Mohammed, Mitch, Brigitte, and Marnie for sharing your ideas. This conference really has been about looking to the future, and I think Marnie gave us a really good reality check about making sure that we don't get looking so far ahead that we forget to deal with the present. Merci beaucoup to everyone. I'm now pleased to present the best student poster at the symposium. I am at a bit of a disadvantage in the fact that I don't know if this individual is with us here in the room or online. So if you are in the room, please come forward. And if you are not in the room, we will make sure and get it to you. So the Best Student Poster Award acknowledges the vital role that posters play in communicating evidence-based research while supporting the next generation of HTA producers. And this year, the best student poster at the 2023 CADTH Symposium is The Impact of COVID-19 Controlled Drugs and Substances Act Exemption on Pharmacists Prescribing of Opioids, Benzodiazepines, and Stimulants in Ontario, a cross-sectional time series analysis. The author is Shanze Chaudhry. She is a graduate student completing her Master's of Science in Pharmaceutical Sciences at the University of Toronto. Congratulations, Shanze. I think she's in the room. course, that didn't have the prompt stand for photo. So, deep breath. We're almost there. This is the end of our first ever hybrid CADTH Symposium. It was wonderful to see so many people together in Ottawa, along with the many virtual attendees from across Canada and around the world. We've had people join us from countries as far away as Australia, Brazil, Denmark, and Switzerland, among many others, which is a testament to the value of this event. There were a few key themes that emerged over the last 3 days that I'll touch on briefly. The first is that change is our new reality. Cycles are no longer in decades. They are in 1 to 2 years. As I said in my opening remarks, change is the only constant in life. The way we make decisions is changing. Real-world evidence is playing an increasingly important role in healthcare decision-making. Mohammed's real-time example shows what we can do when we use the information we have at our fingertips. This week, a final guidance document was published that provides important direction on reporting RWE to maximize transparency for regulatory and HTA decision-making in Canada. You also heard more about CADTH's post-market drug evaluation program, launched barely 7 months ago. Many of you spent time learning about how it will help support policy making and decision making. We are aiming to move evidence into action and account for the entire life cycle of a product. These changes will hopefully enable us to shape future-ready health systems in response to the needs of the day and of tomorrow. People and many organizations like CADTH are making changes to improve our health systems, and we can't do this work alone. This leads me to the second theme that has arrived out of this week, collaboration. We all have different perspectives and experiences that we bring. However, even when our healthcare landscape is challenging, what I heard over and over and over again, whether it was in the sessions, in the hallways, at lunch, where people were gathering after hours, was that there is optimism that is being shared across the country, and we need to be able to harness that. And when you go back to your respective organizations, universities, etc., please take that optimism and positivity with you. Collaboration is vital to many projects presented this week, including the Real World Evidence Guidance, the Choosing Labs Wisely initiative, the new National Strategy for Drugs for Rare Disease. With the skill set and knowledge that we collectively and brilliantly have, we can prepare for a future-ready health system. The last theme that I observed was inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, which were all discussed in a variety of ways and extensively during this symposium. We heard a lot about the importance of incorporating patients, patient journeys, and other diverse perspectives into the work that we all do. Yesterday, in the session about the National Drugs for Rare Disease Strategy, one person suggested that we need to ensure that different perspectives from diverse groups are heard and integrated into the strategy. This is a valuable suggestion. It is essential that we consider lived experience from diverse perspectives, including voices who we don't typically hear from, and that means we have to seek them out. They might not know who we are, nor that we want to hear from them. We want to include patients, caregivers, Indigenous peoples, clinicians, industry in our discussions, because at the end of the day, we share common goals. As Shawnee Gwynn said in her keynote address, nothing about us without us, and we certainly don't want to be building a swimming pool when what people want and need is something drastically different that will make a difference to themselves, their families, or their communities. I would recognize, as many of you know, I wandered room to room over the course of the last 3 days. And there's obviously topics that are sort of near and dear to people's hearts and what the business they do. But I encourage you, and I'll say this again a little bit later, you do have the privilege of having access to all of the sessions that were recorded for the next number of months. Please take the time, put it in your podcast space, put it in your half an hour while you drive to the work, even if you can't watch it. Listen to the sessions that were very specifically targeted to diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's much to be learned, and there's many of you that did not have the opportunity to be able to participate because of having to make choices. So please do that. We need you to hear what's being said from communities, and we need you to hear what's being needed by the real people that are at the end and the center of the work that we do. Finally, I'd like to thank the CADTH staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event look effortless or close to. In particular, I would like to thank Peter Chinnick, Jose Nugent, Shannon Kerr, and so many others that I can't name. I would like to pause, and if people could give them a round of applause. I also would like to call out the entirety of the events team for their leadership in organizing the symposium, our colleagues in the marketing and communication team, the many other teams across CADTH who presented, moderated, volunteers, were wayfinders, helped me with random things. All of you made this last 3 days possible, and we couldn't have done it without you. I would also like to thank the presenters, the speakers, the moderators who shared their insights, research, perspectives, and participated in the questions in the debate. We truly value the time you took out of your busy schedule to choose to be here and share your experience and insights. Merci aux présentateurs, aux conférenciers, et aux modérateurs. Please give everyone, including yourself, and all of our sponsors, a huge round of support. We are grateful for what you do to make this happen. Last two things. A reminder that you're going to be receiving a link to the general satisfaction survey for this year. Your feedback will help us improve the event for next year. For every evaluation we receive, not only will it give you an opportunity to share with us what you liked, things that we could do better, it also gives us an opportunity to donate $5 for each evaluation received to the Ottawa Sustainability Fund. And as I said, I would say it one more time, all of the content will be available on the Attendee Hub for the next 3 months for you to access, watch again, pick your favorite pieces, and think about how you can incorporate it into the work you do. We'll look forward to hosting you again next year in 2024. I do not know where we will be, so I'm not going to tell you that. That will remain a surprise. I would also like to share, as we close off the symposium, that we did announce today that there will be a new CADTH Recognition Award next year, the Dr. Murray Cron Award of Excellence in Health Economics. Stay tuned on our website and our events page for more information. There are lots of people in this room who participated, people in your home areas, your provinces and territories, our colleagues in the federal governments, in the universities, and across all of the places that we work who deserve recognition. And I think it would be great if we could think and showcase those individuals as we go forward. And with that, I would like to declare the 2023 CADTH Symposium officially closed. Par ces remarques, je déclare officiellement closed the Symposium 2023 de la CMTS. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.